decision to collectively, I know obviously it's not just you, but Zach and Frank, to name Cordell the starting left guard?
He ascended kind of the whole training camp period. You know, he played well, he practiced well, and I think what gets lost sometimes is that the evaluation is practice included. You know, it's not just the games and people seeing games. It's all the practices from the OTAs through now. That's all part of the process. And so he continually got better, and he showed all the things that we want to see from a guy that's going to start at guard for us. He's tough, he's physical, he's dependable, he's consistent. All the things that we're looking for those linemen, he's exhibited that stuff. He's earned that job.
So two years in a row, though, Jackson has come into training camp with the head start at guard.
Yep.
Do you view this as almost like a disappointment that for 2 years in a row he hasn't been able to come home with it for week one?
No, I think it's a good lesson for him that your job's never solidified, you know, especially if you don't perform the way that you need to perform at this level. Your job's always open, and you got to fight for it. And there's guys that come in, and some of these offensive linemen will tell you that, you know, they're coming in their 8th, 9th year, and they're still fighting for a job. But you got to fight for your job every day, and you have to perform at that level every year that comes around. Every year's new, and so if you don't, there's guys that are willing to take it. And I think that it's a good lesson for Jackson. He's still a developmental player. He's still someone we're going to have to count on at some point this year because that's how this league works. You're always going to play with injuries, but Cordell was the one that played better, more consistent.
A lot of moving parts.
Go ahead.
A lot of moving parts, Brian, at this time of the year. Obviously,
Yep.
This is nothing new, but when you have a guy like Devin Asiasi, how do you implement him? How do you find out what he can do for you?
That's always the tricky part when you're claiming guys. You know, you haven't had an off-season of work, you haven't had a training camp of work, you don't know the person as well, but you just see what they put on tape. So he's got some skills that we like. We need guys at the tight end position that can fill some roles for us, blocking, catching, all those things. Depth-wise, we needed it. And so what he did on tape and what he's done over his career was appealing to us. How we use him and how he fits will remain to be seen once he gets here and when we get to know him, when we see him in person. We have an idea of what he's capable of based on his tape, but you know, it's always a learning process when you're claiming guys this late. There's a little bit of a ramp-up period trying to get used to what can I do, how can I help us. It's a little bit of an ongoing process.
Same thing for Sharping.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of a role might you anticipate?
Same, you know, you're putting him in the depth spots, in that interior swing spots, and you just kind of see what you have and how quickly they take to learning. They got to learn the verbiage. They got to learn, you know, for a better lack of a term, they got new language for them. You know, it's going to be some things they're unfamiliar with. So it's always going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. But yeah, they're going to come in and compete.
Waivers are always a crapshoot. Did you guys have any idea that you would get 3 guys at 31?
No, I don't think so. I mean, at the end of the day, we felt like being that low in the claim order was going to be tough to get players that we felt would help us. And, you know, thankfully we did. There's some guys that we liked that filled some needs for us at this time of year. And, you know, inevitably, I think every year you find 1 or 2 guys on the waivers at this time, and they end up helping you at some point during the year. So excited about the guys we got.
How beneficial was it, the 2 guys you did get, you evaluated here as coaching staff, front office, you guys evaluated them together during the pre-draft process. Does that matter? Does that help?
It does matter, yeah, because you spend all this time on the draft and you got guys that you like, players that you feel you were interested in at certain points in the draft and they went elsewhere, they went before we were ready to take them, whatever. There's 1,000 different things that happen. Sure. But at the end of the day, there's guys that we do like and that go on other teams, and when they get cut or their contracts are up, and seriously, it always helps that we've collectively talked about these guys, watched these guys, and then you just more or less catching up on their career, where they're at to this point, how they've played in the place that they're coming from. So I think it's a huge advantage we have here because we're so involved in the draft process, and we're so involved with the players around the league that we know what's out there and who's out there. So I think it's an advantage for us.
What are you most excited to see about Burrow, I guess, in the first couple weeks of the year? And just this year in general, maybe?
You know, I think the way that he finished, if we can start the season the way he finished it, you know, he took unbelievable care of the football, which is a huge part of winning games, especially late in the year. But it was part of the reason why we stumbled some. I think we were, you know, not great in the turnover margin early in the year, and he threw some interceptions, some his fault, some not, but we turned the ball over quite a bit. So I'd like to see if we can pick up where we left off in the playoffs, where we were +7 or 8 or whatever it was for that run. We took unbelievable care of the football, especially Joe at the quarterback spot. How efficient we can be on offense if we can keep some drives going and not turn the ball over early in the year. It's always the name of the game those first couple of weeks is how disciplined can you be early in the year. And I think the teams that are disciplined and play well don't take penalties and don't turn the ball over, find ourselves in winning situations more often early in the year.
I think he had of the last 10 years, he had the second best fewest off target throws of any quarterback in the league. Is that something that kind of helps you build a good foundation for whatever it is when you want to build an offense, knowing you have a guy who does hit those windows, and everything else kind of can go off that?
Yeah, I mean, he just doesn't miss, and when he misses, it's not by much. So that's a unique skill. There's not a lot of guys that are as accurate as he is over the course of a pretty large sample size, and that it helps to design a passing game where you know that he's going to find the windows and find completions. It makes life a lot easier when you got a guy that knows how to do that and physically can do it, and that's a lot of fun.
I know you guys have moved on from the fight last week, but when you've got a bunch of new guys and you're trying to get a cohesive, I mean, is that something that can be galvanizing, something they can, like a silver lining they can?
Yeah, it can be. I just think we were talking about it. We were with a bunch of the Rams coaches that night anyway afterwards, and it kind of goes against everything. Joint practices go against everything you kind of preach as coaches. You're protecting your teammates. They're physical. You're tough, and you're trying to get guys to pull back from that. Sometimes it's not the worst thing in the world to see a little bit of physicality, a little bit of guys protecting each other. You do like that part of it. Obviously, you got across the line to some degree, but I think you're looking for traits in guys, and as a unit to see that in guys is not necessarily a bad thing. Guys trying to be physical and take care of their teammates and not take any shit from anybody. There's part of that. If there's part of that that's acceptable, then obviously there's part of it that goes over the line. But there's definitely a silver lining in things like that. I think when you look at it from the 30,000-foot view.
You haven't seen him.
I was going to say you guys have Burrow, Chase, Damian Willis. You've started rookies in week one before. A little different with an interior offensive line. How big of an ask is that? How tough of a proposition is to throw a rookie, especially a team like the Steelers, to throw them in?
Yeah, it's a tough task. I'm not going to sugarcoat that one. That's hard for a guy to step in week one as a rookie and play. But I think Cordell's made of the right things. He's shown the right stuff. It's not too big for him. So I don't worry about that part of it. I think he'll play the first couple plays and he'll get his pads underneath him and he'll settle in and go, it's just football. Albeit versus a very good player, mostly there with Cam Hayward. But it's just what it is, and that's what it's going to be for him. And usually by the time you reach the halfway point, you're not a rookie anymore. And you play a lot of football. That's just how it goes. And so hopefully he adapts quickly. But yeah, there's a learning curve there, and there's no doubt.
You haven't seen him a ton in team. But what did you think of Lyle Collins last week?
He was good. He was good. You could tell there's a little bit of rust from being off for that amount of time. But you see all the things that excites you about him being there. He's big and strong and athletic. He's going to help us in the run game for sure. His pass protection has been fantastic. And it's just getting your pads on, getting your pad legs, as we call it. Being able to feel that sink back into your legs a little bit and be able to move again with that weight on you. It takes a little bit of time. I think he's going to be just fine.
Can you get that? Yeah. Between now and week one?
Yeah, you can. It doesn't take long. It's usually it's kind of the same thing. Like last week, when you put the pads on for the first time in training camp, it's all of a sudden like all your technique goes all over the place, and it's kind of like that for the first preseason game too. Put the pads on, now it's a live opponent, so things kind of get haywire, and then you settle back in. So I think he's going to settle back in pretty quickly. It doesn't take long. It's 2-3 days usually till you feel acclimated again. So last week was great for him. This week is another good week, and then the game week he'll be ready to go.
Does he have how you saw the five guys working together, not just him, but the five guys trying to start to get a little coordination and rhythm and timing?
Yeah, it's important. I think that we're getting to that spot now where those guys got to be together, from here until that opener. And the other thing is too, the first part of the season, those first couple of weeks, you're still trying to find what your team is. You don't know exactly who you are, what you're going to be capable of yet. And so it's still a little bit of an evaluation to some degree. We're trying to figure out what kind of team you do have because it's the first time you see them play together. But the more that those guys can get together, be together, hear the cadence, listen to Joe communicate, is going to be a big deal. So that's it's a good time for that for the next 10 days.
Does LC give you a little bit of attitude, sauce, a little bit of?
What would give you that impression?
Well,
Juice.
I just
Yeah, he does.
I happen to see one of the practices.
Yeah, that's always been his MO. He's a really tough physical player.
Kind of finishes everything.
He finishes everything. He finishes everyone. That's sort of what makes him who he is. And so that's a good thing. We need that in our team, on our offense up front, and the rest of those guys are like that too. Ted's like that. You know, Kappa's like that. Those guys we brought in all have that little bit of mentality where they're always kind of taking it to the edge a little bit, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, that's something you really haven't, I mean, not to downgrade the other guys, but you haven't really had kind of edgy.
As a collective group, this is the edgiest group we've had. Yeah.
Good for Cordell to be around that as a young
Yes,
player.
very, very good for Cordell to be around that. Cordell's got a little bit of that himself too. You know, he's don't sleep on that kind of all shucks thing he's got going. He's a tough dude, and he looks to finish people all the time. And so I think it's a good mix for those guys to be together. Finally, get those guys together is fun to watch.
Brian, last year, Zach told us before the season the goal was to be more explosive. That was the main goal. This year I asked him, he said to be even more explosive. But if I asked you that question, what would you say the goal for the offense is?
Yeah, I mean that explosiveness is hard to repeat. We were remarkably explosive last year. I think the key is to try to maintain that. But I think ultimately for us, there's going to be times and when defenses dictate that they're not going to let us do that. And so when we have opportunities to be a little more consistent down the field, 10-play drives, 12-play drives, you know, I think we weren't as good at that last year as I think we're capable of being. And so when the time calls for it and when the defense structure dictates it, we have to be able to put together a 10, 12-play drive without really feeling the heat and being able to move the ball right down the field the same way. So explosiveness is great. We're going to try like hell to be as explosive as we were last year, but the drive consistency is another part of that we can be a lot better.
Can runs be explosive, Brian? Runs can be explosive.
Yeah, we haven't had many of those over our time here. You know, I don't know. I think we're low in the rankings of explosive runs, which are different markings for different people. But generally speaking, a 12-yard run is considered an explosive run. A 20-yard pass is usually considered an explosive pass. So those are kind of general benchmarks. Some are more, some are less. But if we could find a way to get more explosive runs, that would certainly be helpful. Part of that is getting Joe into the second level better than we have. And I think that we're a little more equipped to do that this year. Let him get into the DBs in the secondary where they don't want to tackle him as much and keep the contact off them before the line of scrimmage. So, runs can be very explosive.
It seems like you're probably going to get a lot more too high looks this year. Does that go into does that affect kind of the route concepts that you guys build throughout the offseason?
Yeah.
Saying, okay, hey, we know we're going to get more too high looks. We probably need to build more concepts that are kind of too breakers.
You certainly have our list of things that we like versus all the different coverages we see, and all these too high, the quarters and the twos and all the top-down mentality that these defenses have now. There's definitely things that we've explored over the course of the season, and thankfully we have a quarterback that's really good at finding intermediate windows and being accurate with the ball underneath. And so I feel really confident we'll be able to handle that. Defenses are designed to take explosive plays away. That's what everyone's doing these days, and they're trying not to give them up. And so we got to find ways. If they're not going to give them to us, we have to find ways to create them with, like I said, the run game is part of it.
Right.
We can find some explosive runs, and then being consistent in drives. When they're not going to let us get on top, we have to be able to complete the ball underneath with a high degree of efficiency.
I guess that requires your quarterback also to have a lot of patience and not be kind of tempted to test some of those gaps and those hole shots.
Yeah, and that's how when we play those styles of defense, it's how we talk. Joe understands it. We talk about it during the week. But that's part of what it's going to take to win this game. And every week there's usually keys to victory, and one of them sometimes that's a fun one. But the keys to victory would be.
Are you calling 911?
Jesus, you guys all right over there? But that's part of it. Is you know the mentality the team is going to take. Teams want to blitz you a bunch. You know that kind of mentality. They're going to play everything soft and stay on top. And there's a patience that's involved in it. And some guys do better than others with it.
Right. So were you able to run people out of cover two as much as you want to last year?